When did your golden retriever buddy finally snap? My friend Macy was 13 when she started sacrificing her own life to save her little sisters. Zada had aplastic anemia, meaning she needed extra blood, bone marrow, even organs. By 16, Macy had donated over 500 pints of blood. Had core crews drilled into her for bone marrow 6 times. Even gave Zada a kidney and 60% of her liver. At 18, she was down to 87 pounds, taking 23 pills a day to keep her remaining organs functioning. Her dream of motherhood was dead, her immune system was destroyed, and her bones fractured upon the slightest impact. But Zada was alive, thriving, and living the teenage life Macy gave up. 2 years later, Macy got diagnosed with lymphoma. Doctors said it was likely the extreme stress she put her body through. And yet, Macy didn't cry or didn't complain. All she asked for was one thing. When cancer patients finish their last treatment, they ring this brass bell in the main lobby. 3 rings to say, "You survived." Macy had watched dozens of people ring it. Their families would cry and cheer. She wanted that for once. She wanted to be the one being celebrated for surviving. She texted the family group chat. June 15th, they let me ring the remission bell. Would mean the world if you could be there. Zada instantly responded with heart emojis. The whole family promised they'd be there. The morning of June 15th, Macy did her makeup for the first time in 2 years and even styled what was left of her hair. During her final treatment, nurses kept asking how she was feeling. "Amazing. My family's coming," she kept saying. "They're all coming to see me ring the bell." At 2:45, Macy was sitting in the lobby watching the main entrance, her hands shaking from excitement. But at 3 p.m., there was nobody there. The bell coordinator asked if she was ready. "Just 1 more minute," Macy said. "They're probably just parking." At 3:05, Macy texted the group. "Hey, I'm at the bell waiting for you." Zada read it, but gave no response. Macy called her and got nothing. She called Mom and got the same, but her dad answered, "Hey, sweetie, what's up?" Zada was laughing in the background. "Dad, I'm at the hospital." "The bell ceremony?" There was a pause. "Oh crap, honey. That's today. We threw Zada a college acceptance party. She got into Berkeley. Full ride." Macy's legs gave out. She sat down hard on the lobby bench. "Zada's party." Her voice was tiny. "Yeah, it was a surprise thing. She wanted to celebrate getting into pre-med. You know, following in your footsteps, helping people like you helped her." Then Zada shouted into the phone. "Is that Macy? Tell her we'll celebrate with her later." "Dad," Macy whispered. "I'm at my last cancer treatment, the bell ceremony. I texted everyone. You all said you'd come." "Oh, honey, you know how bad I am with texts. Look, ring the bell and have someone video it. We'll watch it later." He hung up. The lobby was now full of other patients and families, all watching this girl in a yellow dress sitting alone. Macy stood up slowly and walked to the bell. She was supposed to ring it 3 times, but she rang it once. A few people clapped awkwardly, and that's when the tears started coming. Pamela, the head nurse who'd been with Macy every step of the way, ran over and pulled her into a hug. "I gave her everything. I gave her my body," Macy cried. "I can't have kids because of it. I gave her everything and she couldn't give me 10 minutes. The next Sunday was their regular family dinner. Macy almost didn't go, but habit is hard to break. She walked in and everyone was still talking about Zada's Berkeley acceptance. Nobody mentioned the bell. Nobody asked about her final treatment. Nobody even said congratulations. Halfway through dinner, Mom casually said, "Oh, Macy, did you do your little bell thing?" Macy set down her fork. "My little bell thing? Yeah, at the hospital. Dad said you called during Zada's party about the bell." "You mean the bell that means I beat cancer? The bell you didn't see me ring?" Macy shrieked out. That's when Zada piped up like it was funny. "Oh my God, Macy, you're so dramatic about everything. It's just a bell. It's not like ringing it changes anything. You still beat cancer either way." The room went quiet and Macy looked around the table at her parents who were already back to eating at Zada, who was suddenly on her phone replying to a text. "You know what?" Macy said, her voice steady and cold. "You're right, Zada. It is just a bell, just like how you getting into Berkeley is just an acceptance letter, just a piece of paper. Doesn't change anything, right? Zada rolled her eyes. God, why do you always have to make everything about you? We get it. You donated stuff. You had cancer, but the rest of us have lives too. I donated stuff. Macy stood up. I donated stuff. How about I donate your acceptance letter to the fireplace? She started marching to the framed acceptance letter. Dad's chair scraped against the floor as he jumped up and his hand wrapped around my wrist before I could reach the frame. Mom was already on her feet, screaming about how I was ruining everything again and being selfish like always. The acceptance letter sat there behind glass while Dad's grip got tighter and my thin wrist started hurting under his fingers. Zada didn't even look up from her phone and kept scrolling through Instagram like we weren't even there. I yanked my arm back hard and Dad let go but stayed between me and the fireplace with his hands up like I was some wild animal. My voice cracked as I started listing everything I gave up for her while tears ran down my face. The blood draws every 2 weeks that left me dizzy and weak for days afterward. The bone marrow extractions where they drilled into my hip bones while I bit down on a towel. The kidney surgery at 14 that took 6 weeks to recover from and made me miss the whole school year. The liver donation that nearly killed me when I got an infection and spent 3 months in the hospital. My wrecked immune system that kept me from school dances, football games, even just going to the mall. The 23 pills I swallow every morning just to keep my remaining organs working. The fact that I'll never have kids because my body is too damaged from everything I gave. Zada finally looked up and rolled her eyes like I was exaggerating about nothing that mattered. Mom kept yelling about how ungrateful I was, and Dad just shook his head like I was the problem. I pushed past him toward the front door while Mom followed, screaming about family loyalty. The door slammed behind me, and I ran to my car parked on the street. My hands shook so badly I dropped the keys twice before I finally got inside and collapsed into the driver's seat. I sat there for an hour, shaking, tears soaking my shirt, snot running down my face. My phone buzzed, Pamela's name. She asked how family dinner went since she knew it was Sunday. I typed back that I finally stood up for myself and hit send before I could regret it. The phone rang immediately. Pamela's voice was soft, worried, when I answered with a sob instead of a hello. She told me to come to her house right away and not go back home no matter what. I started the car and drove 15 minutes to her small house near the hospital while she stayed on the phone. She was already on the porch when I pulled up, running toward me before I could even turn the car off. Her arms wrapped around me as I broke apart, and she led me inside. She made chamomile tea while I sat on her couch wrapped in a lavender-scented blanket. Through sobs, I told her how they skipped my bell ceremony for Zada's party. How they couldn't give me 10 minutes after everything I'd given up to keep Zada alive. Pamela sat beside me, rubbing my back, listening. She didn't defend them or say I was overreacting like everyone else always did. She just handed me tissues and made sure I drank my tea. Midnight, when I finally stopped crying, she set up the couch with sheets and pillows. I fell asleep in my clothes and woke to sunlight coming through her living room window. My phone showed 17 missed calls from Mom and a string of texts calling me selfish and dramatic. Dad's messages were different, asking me to come home and talk like adults. I deleted them all. Pamela was in the kitchen making scrambled eggs and toast. She took one look at me and told me I didn't have to go back if I wasn't ready. We ate in silence. Then she reminded me about my hospital follow-up that afternoon. I'd forgotten completely. Pamela insisted on driving me. At 2 o'clock, my oncologist took one look at me and immediately asked what was wrong. I weighed 85 pounds, 2 less than last week, and my eyes were red and swollen. Pamela quietly explained about the bell ceremony while I stared at the floor. The doctor looked genuinely concerned and asked if I had anyone to talk to. Pamela mentioned someone she knew, and he wrote down a name, Jonas Hodges, family trauma and medical PTSD specialist, with an opening that same afternoon. Pamela drove me there. The office was filled with plants and soft music. Jonas was younger than I expected, kind eyes, and he listened to my whole story without interrupting. When I finished, he asked what I wanted from my family. I realized I'd never thought about that. Everything had always been about what they needed from me. After the session, Pamela drove me back. Zada was waiting on the porch, arms crossed, annoyed. She said Mom and Dad sent her to bring me home, and she'd had to cancel plans with friends because of me. I told her I wasn't going back until things changed. She called me petty for making everything about a stupid bell. When I reminded her about the kidney, liver, and bone marrow, she shrugged. That was your choice. Nobody forced you. I can't blame them for living their lives now. Pamela watched from the doorway, her jaw tight. Zada shook her head, grabbed her keys. Whatever, Macy. When you're done with your pity party, maybe you'll remember we're your family. She slammed her car door so hard the whole car shook before driving off. She really doesn't get it, I whispered, my voice breaking. Pamela put a hand on my shoulder and guided me back inside. She made more tea while I sat at her kitchen table, staring into nothing. She was only 5 when it all started, Pamela said softly. To her, it was just normal that you gave her what she needed. I nodded, though it didn't make it hurt less. I spent 3 days on Pamela's couch, helping with small tasks to feel useful. On the 3rd morning, Dad showed up alone. He looked older, tired. He apologized and asked me to lunch. Pamela's look told me I didn't have to go, but I did. At the old diner, he said they loved me, that they just got caught up in Zada's Berkeley excitement. I showed him the family chat where everyone promised to come to my bell ceremony. He stared, then pushed the phone back. When are you coming home? He asked. I need space, Dad, I told him. I need to figure out who I am without being the family donor. He drove me back in silence. That afternoon, Pamela helped me find a tiny studio near the hospital that took disability payments. The next day, we signed the lease. Pamela helped me move in with my few clothes, medical supplies, and a thrift store bed. She stocked the little kitchen with food I could handle. That evening, Mom found my room empty and left furious voicemails, calling me selfish and even threatening to call the police. But I heard Dad in the background reminding her I was 20 and free to live where I wanted. I turned my phone off and sat on my new bed, both terrified and free. The next week, Jonas helped me write a letter to my family, explaining my boundaries, family therapy if they wanted a relationship with me. He mailed it for me. A few days later, I saw a flyer at the community center for a cancer survivor support group led by Freya Mansfield. I went to the next support group meeting and shared about the bell ceremony. People nodded, one woman even cried, and for the first time I felt understood. Freya welcomed me and I started going every week, slowly opening up. 2 weeks into living alone, I woke up on my bathroom floor, too weak to reach my phone. Pamela used the spare key and found me barely conscious. She called 911 and stayed with me until the ambulance came. At the hospital, Dr. Dorian Blake listened carefully, ran tests, and admitted me for malnutrition and dehydration. He set me up with a nutritionist who specialized in cases like mine. The next morning, Freya and 3 group members came with flowers, soup, and books, making me laugh and feel cared for in a way my family never had. Later, my parents showed up demanding answers, but when I pressed the call button, staff asked them to leave for my health. Mom yelled about being my mother until security escorted them out. That night, Zada posted online calling me dramatic, but people quickly reminded her of everything I'd given. Screenshots spread, and she deleted it. 3 days later, Dorian discharged me with a strict nutrition plan, weekly check-ins, and a long list of medications. Pamela took me home, stocked my kitchen, and stayed to make sure I ate on schedule. At my next session, Jonas suggested I start journaling about what life could look like without my family's expectations. That night, I filled pages with dreams I'd forgotten, traveling, finishing school online, making real friends, learning guitar, going to concerts, eating at restaurants without worrying about Zada. 2 days later, Dad emailed, "Let's fix this." He said they'd try family therapy, but only if I came home first. I replied that therapy had to come first, since home wasn't safe for my mental health. He called me stubborn, said Mom cried every day, but I didn't respond. Instead, I met with a hospital social worker who was shocked at my donation history. She said she'd never seen so much taken from one person so young and would look into programs for donors like me. At the next support group, Freya asked me to share. I talked about being the healthy sister, always expected to give, and about my family skipping my bell ceremony for Zada's party. People cried. One woman hugged me, and another, Carol, said she'd been through something similar and gave me her number. The next day, Mom finally agreed to family therapy but insisted on bringing her own therapist. Jonas warned me it might be more about control than healing. At the session, Mom and her therapist came prepared with notes. Her therapist spoke first, framing Mom as traumatized by Zada's illness and me as attention-seeking, unable to see the bigger picture. She dismissed Jonas's medical documentation of my donations, saying physical sacrifice didn't cancel out emotional manipulation. Mom nodded along, adding that I'd always been dramatic and jealous of Zada. In therapy, Jonas tried to focus on the missed bell ceremony, but Mom's therapist dismissed it as performative. Jonas stood and calmly listed every donation I'd made, the medical consequences, and asked why I'd never been given psychological support. Mom grew red, accused him of bias, and stormed out with her therapist. Dad stayed behind, quiet, then pulled out a $30,000 check. He said it couldn't fix the past, but maybe it could help my future. I accepted it because I needed the money, but told him it wouldn't repair everything. He agreed and asked about doing therapy himself. Jonas said he'd recommend someone, but Dad said he trusted him after seeing how he handled Mom's therapist. We scheduled a session, and he gave me a real hug before leaving. 3 nights later, Zada showed up at my apartment drunk, crying about how people at Berkeley had turned on her after reading my story online. She ranted that she never asked for my organs, and it wasn't her fault Mom and Dad made me give. She accused me of ruining her start at college. I brought out a folder with my medical records and photos from the treatments. Her face went pale as she saw the surgeries, complications, and the fertility reports saying I'd never have children. She vomited, and I held her hair while she sobbed. Later, she asked why I'd done it if it destroyed me. I told her, simply, because I loved her and wanted her to live. She broke down again, saying she felt like a fraud, afraid she'd never measure up as a doctor after taking so much from me. I told Zada she didn't need to be me, just herself, but she had to respect sacrifices and never take them for granted. She asked to stay, so I made up the couch. We talked all night about her fears during her illness, her guilt now, and how she'd minimized my suffering to cope. I reminded her she was a child then, but now she had choices. She fell asleep on the couch, and I sat in the kitchen at sunrise, feeling like something had shifted. The next week at Sunday dinner, Zada said she wanted real family therapy, not the session with Mom's therapist. Mom resisted, but Zada threatened to defer Berkeley if they refused. Dad supported therapy, and Mom reluctantly agreed. Jonas fit us in that Friday. For the first time, we actually talked. Mom admitted fear made her stop seeing me as separate from Zada. Dad said he'd pretended everything was fine to hide his failure. Zada admitted she minimized my sacrifices to avoid survivor's guilt. Jonas asked us to sit with these feelings. Mom broke down crying and, for the first time, apologized sincerely for missing my bell ceremony. Afterward, I decided to hold my own redo ceremony with the people who had supported me. Pamela and my support group quickly rallied around me. When Mom asked to come, I told her the family had to prove they were serious. 3 more therapy sessions, before earning that right. They agreed. In follow-ups, Dad opened up about his childhood, Zada about the pressure of living up to my sacrifices, and Mom about always seeing me as the strong one. For the first time, it felt like real conversations were happening instead of walls. In therapy, Zada broke down hearing the details of my pain from donations. She threw up, then returned to apologize and admit she'd minimized it to cope. In the 3rd session, everyone made amends. Dad promised to see me as an individual, Mom vowed to stop minimizing and show up more, and Zada promised to honor my sacrifices with gratitude, not guilt. On the day of my redo ceremony, the hospital lobby was filled with friends, nurses, and my support group. Pamela decorated with yellow ribbons, Dad brought sunflowers, Mom gave me an album of my journey, and Zada wore a "My Sister is My Hero" shirt. I rang the bell 3 times, the sound echoing as everyone cheered. At the party after, my family stayed, helped, and listened. Mom asked Pamela questions about my treatment, Dad cleaned up, and Zada announced she'd started the Macy Foundation for Sibling Donors. Naming me as part of the board, I began volunteering with pediatric cancer patients, connecting with them in ways only someone who'd been there could. My health improved, I gained weight, reduced medications, and regained strength. Dad helped me explore vocational programs, supporting me without comparing me to Zada. She called often from Berkeley, sharing normal sister moments and promising to become a doctor who sees the whole family. Mom entered therapy, began writing honest emails, and eventually apologized without excuses. Pamela, promoted to head of nursing education, asked me to speak to new nurses. Later, the hospital created the Macy Protocol, new guidelines ensuring psychological support and recognition for sibling donors. By Thanksgiving, my family had changed. They planned the whole meal around what I could eat, labeling safe foods, and Zada tested recipes just for me. For the first time, I felt truly seen and cared for.